Hello and welcome. Video evidence shows Ukrainian troops have reached and at some points breached the first continuous line of defense or fortification line of the Surovikin line, and Russia's redeployment shows that they are basically out of reserves. They have to laterally redeploy units to keep the front lines under control. This is a good sign for Ukraine, and in this situation report, I'm going to show you why. We'll start off with a satellite picture from the airport at Pskov, where the Ukrainians attacked. We can see here, and here are the wreckages of destroyed Ilyushin 76. There were two others visible on pictures that had scorch marks, so they were clearly damaged but not destroyed. And the interesting part is the pictures showed that the planes are now no longer in their usual parking lots, or spots, which would be an indication that the Russians remove them to positions that are not automatically known with GPS guided munitions. The interesting part about this attack is, though, that Budanov, the head commander, basically the commander of the GUR, of the Ukrainian military intelligence, said that the Ukrainians were operating out of Russian territory. So those drone attacks were not done with drones launched from Ukrainian territory, at least if he's telling the truth. It was done from within Russian territory. Obviously, we have no clue from where exactly, and whether it was Russians that helped Ukraine or whether it was Ukrainian special forces or however it was done. We go to the developments along the front line here. We have in the north reports that Russians are still attacking at Kupiansk. Riba is first of all, the Russians are claiming they still have successes. They talk about positions taken, the advancing strategic heights, etc. But I have not seen any visual evidence from this area that the Russians have gained additional ground. In Riba's map, for instance, Sinkivka is already considered to be under Russian control. I have seen no evidence whatsoever to prove this. So as of my judgment, Sinkivka is still under Ukrainian control. The interesting part is, though, when Riba talks about the situation, they are talking that there are only positional fighting. There's only positional fighting going on anymore. Basically, the Russian side, as well as the Ukrainian side, do not show the intention of actively and seriously moving the front line anymore, which would be an indication that the Russian offensive in the direction of Kupiansk is more or less over, has already reached its culmination point. Other than that, we have reports about Ukrainian counterattacks in that area. I do not see any evidence that those counterattacks had any success. We have Russian attacks at Novoselivke. They are reported here, and at Novoye Horivka. Also in these directions, Russians were attacking. Again, no proof of change of territory, and it's the same with the Ukrainians. Several attacks from Torske in the direction of Kremina and fighting in the Serebryanske forest. I cannot document any Ukrainian successes in those attacks. South of the Seversky Donetsk, the river here, we have Russian attacks on Bilohorivka. The Russians are reporting Ukrainian attacks at Orikhovo, Vasilivka, basically along that road here. I do not see any change in territory. Also, the Ukrainians are reported to attack at Klishivka, and the Russians attack at Kurdyumivka and Ozaryanivka. I cannot document any change in territory here at all. So all the attacks from either side seems to have not achieved anything in the last few days, at least from what I can prove. Further south, we have reports of Russian attacks at Siverne, battles at Nevelske. I have no idea here exactly who was attacking. Was it the Ukrainians or was it the Russians? It's just reported that there's fighting going on here. There's also Russian attacks on Krasnohorivka, Marinka, and Novomikhailivka. I cannot confirm any change in territory here once more. We have reports about Ukrainian attacks here at the Oblast border south of Velika Novosilka. This is Oblast Donetsk and this is Zaporizhzhia. The Ukrainians are attacking south here along the river from Urushaine, from what I've seen. And while there were some rumors they have already reached Staromylnivka, there is no, it was a misidentification, a misgeolocalization. I cannot confirm the Ukrainians having advanced further than what was recently reported. Basically, their heads were more or less in this area here. But I'm not able to confirm that they were able to push the front line further south. We have reports about Ukrainian attacks in the direction of Pryutne. Again, no results that can be confirmed. The Russians say they counterattacked at Pryutne and claim they gained 100 to 200 meters. No confirmation again. So basically, from what we last know, the front line is more or less unmoved from the last situation report. This is a little different south of Orikhiv, here at the Ukrainian attack in the direction of Melitopol. That is obviously their hoped goal in this offensive, to reach Melitopol and Berdyansk. So far, they have advanced slowly further south, and we have new visual evidence. This is a video of Ukrainian troops marching fairly relaxed past a knocked out T-72 B3 likely. And what we can see in the background here is, see where it's visible. Yeah. This is the Surovikin line. Those are the dragon teeth that we can see here clearly. This is geolocalized at this position. It's still not beyond the Surovikin line, but it shows us that the area must be under a level of control that the personnel can more or less walk relaxed without immediate danger of being shot at. This would be the indication if we go back to the to the maps here. This is more or less recorded here. So it's considered that the Russians are pushed away from the line here. As we could see, it was in direct line of sight and you wouldn't be able to walk around like this clearly. I have not seen, though, evidence that the Ukrainians are actually in the dragon teeth here, but we had visual evidence of them reaching somewhere in this area. So we know they likely pushed the Russians away in this area. We also have an interesting video, and this is showing an artillery shell, the shelling of Verbove. And the interesting part is it is the southern part. It's geolocalized here in the southern part of Verbove. So more or less in this area here, which would indicate that if the geolocalization isn't wrong, which is always a possible, I have not seen fully conclusive evidence, but if it's not wrong, then either the Russians by mistake shelled their own positions or the Ukrainians are in the southern part of Verbove, or at least were in. That's always the issue with the reports we have here. Just the fact that we see some Ukrainian tanks there, some Ukrainian troops, doesn't necessarily mean they hold it under control. They might have been pushed back, they might have been destroyed there, or they might have advanced further than that. But we just have the glimpse of a moment unless we see proper positions that are taken. So it's possible that the Ukrainians advanced further into Verbove, but as said, right now we cannot fully confirm this. But we have in films, though, is showing that it seems to be clear that Verbove was actually shelled in the southern part. So the geolocalization seems to be correct, and it seems to be clear that the Russians shelled there. But then again, in theory, it could be a misunderstood thing, because the guy taking the video could be someone misidentifying Ukrainian artillery fire. And the last news we had were the Ukrainian in this area, so that they would shell this one would make sense if they haven't advanced here. So this is inconclusive, but I have a Ukrainian military blogger and he's talking about the situation here, and I have his map. It's from today. So this is accurate, and he only shows that he claims that the northwestern part of Verbove is in the gray area, basically saying no site has permanent positions there anymore. According to him, it is gray area, and and the southern part that was shelled would, according to a Ukrainian mill blogger, would claim that it's still under Russian hands. So it seems that this was a misidentification. In my mind, I would guess, if I was forced to give a finite statement, I would say it was Ukrainian artillery shelling this, and just a misunderstanding that supposedly the Russians shelled there. This at least seems likely to me. And we have more things about the area which are kind of interesting. Riba wrote that I have not seen, before recording the video, a Riba report for today, but yesterday, so on September 1st, they said that there were 10, in the last 24 hours, there were 10 missions flown by the Ukrainian Air Force with Sukhoi 25 and Sukhoi 27, as well as MiG-29. And not only did they fly support missions close to the front line, but they were also launching HARM and MALT, the miniature air-launched decoy missiles south in the direction Tokmak and further, basically with MALT to lure out Russian air defense to then strike it with the HARM and destroy it. This clearly shows us the Ukrainians want to push away the Russian air defense in this area, allowing them to use their own air forces a little more freely. On the Dnipro, I have no confirmation of any serious changes. Russians are claiming that they destroyed the Ukrainians under the bridge. They claim it again, and they claim how many they killed, but I do not have any proof of this. We know that the activity is continuing along the islands, and there are some claims that the Ukrainians are back here over the Dnipro at Kosachi Laheri. I have not seen fully convincing proof of this yet, though, and as said, we are at a point where it's more or less commando rates. Both sides fight for the islands because they allow then access to the other side's shore of the river, but overall the situation doesn't seem to have changed in any serious way. The interesting part is more about what we know about the general situation, and that is that the Russians have now moved the 25th Army to Luhansk, so this area. The 25th Army was just recently established and should not be at full strength, and it should not be fully trained. It is replacing parts of the 41st Army that is being removed to Zaporizhzhia, and at the same time it said that the 76 Guard VDV division is moved from Kremina to Zaporizhzhia. The 76 Guard VDV division supposedly is the last VDV division air assault unit, which is considered to be an elite, the last of their units that is more or less intact. They have suffered the least losses recently. They were at a front area where they didn't lose big amounts of equipment lately, and they are now being sent here to Zaporizhzhia, probably to stop the Ukrainians south of Robotine. The interesting part is, as this shows us that the Russians are moving their units laterally, which means they are not moving them from reserve positions in the back and sending them forward, but they send them from one front line to the next. This means the units don't have rest and recuperation. They are sent from one fighting position directly to the next one, which only diminishes their fighting ability and thus is a sign of weakness. There is no arguing around it. If you are forced to send units from one front directly to the next one and do not have reserve units that are being sent forward and then maybe be replaced by these units, then you are running out of reserves. So the Ukrainian attrition strategy or tactics, I guess, strategy is probably more right in this regard. The Ukrainian attrition strategy that they are running south of Orikhiv in the southern area now, where they, after initial attempts to break through the Russian lines, after those failed with fairly high losses, where they switched over to do small attacks to lure out the Russian tanks and the Russian artillery to then destroy those, this attrition strategy seems to clearly be working. The problem is with this is, though, while they are clearly able to make the Russians suffer serious losses. We do not have conclusive proof how high their own losses were. Obviously, if your own losses are equal or higher to the enemies, if you can replace your troops less than the opponent, then your whole attrition has failed. If they are in combat power more or less equal, it has also failed if you are in the offensive. Obviously, Verdun is an example that is being considered here, where the German army managed to kill more French soldiers than it lost, but it still didn't gain anything, and it was not able to break the French army, especially as the higher number of French losses was negligible in comparison to the overall losses. So basically, while technically the French lost a little more, they more or less lost the same. So whether the Ukrainians will be able to continue this, whether they'll be able to send in fresh reinforcements to take up the slack to keep on fighting is not clear. Generally, most commentators say yes, they will be able. We see videos appearing recently, a video of a Ukrainian unit that has the Leopard 2A4V, the new version that the Ukrainians created with ERA on it, a whole, at least a battalion marched up on a field ready for it. The first Leopard 1s are arriving. Abrams will arrive soon. So there's a guess that the Ukrainians will be able to keep it up, but we'll have to observe how far they'll keep it up and how long the Russians will be able to keep in pushing units there. Even while we do see Russian weaknesses in those redeployments on the lateral level, they are not conclusive proof that this will lead to a Ukrainian breakthrough. It would be far too early or too optimistic, or it would be saying something that from a pro-Ukrainian point of view is wished for. I do not see serious proof that we can say they will definitely break through and they will definitely reach it. The Americans now believe that the Ukrainians have a realistic chance of reaching Tokmak, which would already be a success, but obviously a far lower than Melitopol. Nothing has changed in the conclusion from what we see from the US side, that the Ukrainians will no longer be able to reach Melitopol, and that seems to be a fair and likely assessment. We have an article, though, from Khodorkovsky. Alexander Khodorkovsky is a leader, a commander of, I think, a DNR unit, and he's also having some political positions and so on. He's an Eastern Ukrainian, and he is writing about the war. He's a mill blogger, where he obviously always spreads the Russian point of view, but now and then he does some critical talks about their own situation, and we have one of those examples here. He's basically saying that the Ukrainians have superiority in artillery, and while the Russians usually take several days to strike positions that were sent to the artillery, the Ukrainians do it much, much faster. Overall, as said, like, this is the overall Ukrainian superiority at the area of his front line is a serious problem, according to his understanding, and that will cause further problems. But again, this is just showing us a point which we've heard about in the past couple of weeks, yet it doesn't necessarily mean the Ukrainians will be able to advance further. From the Black Sea, we have news here. Riba is reporting about the drone attack that happened yesterday night. According to Riba, Russian military blogger, according to Riba, 3 Ukrainian drones were used, but they were not used to strike the bridge, but to hit a patrol boat. And according to them, the patrol boat was able to defeat the attackers, destroy all 3 drones without being hit. That's at least what they are saying. But the interesting part is it's still right in front of the Strait of Kerch, where the Ukrainians are still able to operate their naval drones. When it comes to troop generation, we have troop generation, and overall we have the news now that the deputy foreign minister of the Russian the deputy defense minister of the Russian Federation traveled to several countries where the Russians have a military presence, especially where Wagner had a military presence. And it's guessed that he is talking to the governments about replacing Wagner, as Wagner is in a process of falling apart after the killing of Yevgeny Prigozhin. And according to mill bloggers, the Russian Ministry of Defense wants to set up a volunteer unit that's going to be called the Russian Expeditionary Corps. with 20,000 men to use them. And obviously, they hope to find a lot of Wagner soldiers willing to sign up for this. Expeditionary Corps would guess that they would sign up to not be used in Ukraine, but we'll have to watch how it happens. We have interesting news about Prigozhin here, and it's from the Levada Center in Russia. This is considered to be an independent research institute that doesn't deliver just results that are wished for by the Russian government. And according to them, 26% think that Prigozhin's death was an accident. 20% think it was revenge. 16% believe that he was fainting, I think is the name, or faking his death to get away. And 14% think that a foreign intelligence agency was responsible. This obviously shows us that the public is not united about anything, especially not about the Russian government being responsible, which could cause some problem. So in this regard, it's a perfect result for the Russian president. The right persons will probably have received the message that he will not tolerate not tolerate treason, as I assume it to be certain that it was the Russian government who did the killing. And the right persons will have received that message while the public is not outraged over it. So it should not cause problems for Putin to have taken out Yevgeny Prigozhin. When it comes to international support, we have news here. We have news here that the Ukraine will receive the first Abrams at the middle of this month. At the middle of September, they will receive 10 Abrams, and the 200 Ukrainian soldiers that were trained on the Abrams tanks are now fully trained, have finished their training. The first 10 are going to be handed over at the middle of the month, and the rest is following, in quotation mark, this fall. So I guess within the next 8 weeks, more or less. We have claims here by the Ukrainians that they can now strike targets 1,500 kilometers away with missiles. This is in response probably to the attack on Pskov, but we still have not seen any evidence of them actually being able to strike this, especially with missiles, not with cheap drones that they thought up. So while it's possible, and the interesting part is also the first they are talking about 700 or even 1,000 to 1,500 kilometers away, it feels more like this is a piece that basically takes spreads some rumors. It's the Ukrainian Pravda here. I would not take it too serious that the Ukrainians have this already, but what we see, for instance, in this article here about the strike on, where was it? At a later article, I can show it you here, where they're talking about the Neptunes, that the Neptunes are increasingly being used to strike ground targets. That shows us that the Neptune, which was a prototype system at the beginning of the war, is now in serial production, which proves to us that the Russians were not able to take out the Ukrainian defense industry, and that it's actually able to keep producing, to keep innovating. And that should at least give the possibility that there might be some truth to this message, at least in the midterm. But as I said, as of now, we don't have any proof that the Ukrainians already have the possibility to use missiles at distances of 1,500 kilometers. There's a video here of the Ukrainians now using cardboard drones, and as you can see, it's blurred where the actual object is flying. We see that it has a downward directed what is it called, like fragmentation warhead. It's clearly showing a small plane-like object, and it's being considered to be a cardboard drone. And you can see that the splinters at least were able to penetrate wood here. Obviously, this is not going to, it doesn't seem likely that this is going to help against tanks, but against planes that have a thin skin and that might be loaded with fuel, this might obviously help destroy them, or at least take them out for a serious time. While the object is very cheap, as they are from cardboard, they are cheap to make and very difficult to detect with radar. So Ukraine might actually be able to flood the Russian airspace with affordable drones in some kind of a reverse Shahid attacks. Then we go to this Riba article, and according to that, they are not just talking about this, but the interesting part is that they are talking about the German Taurus. The Taurus is a cruise missile that is comparable to Scalp and Storm Shadow, just it's being considered to be more powerful and more modern. And they claim they are already in Ukraine. I guess they don't really know how German government works because they claim a second delivery is going to happen in August. The likelihood that this government delivers Taurus after declaring they won't walk ahead unless the Americans join. So basically, until America delivers ATACMS, Germany will not deliver Taurus. This is in line with the current Scholz government to what they do. And the likelihood of the German government publicly saying this, but in secret handing over Taurus is so laughably, the likelihood is so laughably low that I would bet money on it to be nonsense. But I said, just a humorous example of Riba not having a clue about German politics in this regard. Anyways, that was it already from me for now. If you enjoyed this situation report, please give it a thumbs up. It really helps with the algorithm, and leave a comment what you think about the current counteroffensive and when you expect German Taurus to actually arrive in Ukraine. If you're new here, I would like to invite you to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so you don't miss future videos. And this channel is only possible because of the support of viewers like you. If you like to support the channel, you can do so by the means in the description. Thank you very much to everyone already supporting this channel, and that's it from me for now. Thank you for watching, and I'll be back.